Today, Apple is viewed as a juggernaut of a tech company, and they are. With a market value of $1.8 trillion, the company became the most valuable in the world as of July 2020. But things haven't always been this way. At one point, Apple was on the brink of bankruptcy. But there was one product Apple released that helped turn the tide and set them on course for success. That was the iMac. And in this video, I'm going to explain how it helped save the company. This is Greg with Apple Explained, and I want to thank Squarespace for sponsoring this video. If you'd like to help decide which topics I cover, make sure you're subscribed, and voting polls like this one will show up in your mobile activity feed. Now, in order to recognize the iMac's effect on Apple, we have to understand what the company was like before the product was released. Apple had success with an earlier computer called the Apple II, released in 1997, and mild success with the Macintosh in 1984, but both products were aging. Companies like IBM were making computers running the Windows operating system and selling them for far less than the Macintosh. That meant more sales of Windows PCs and more developers creating useful applications for that platform, as opposed to the Macintosh, which ran its own proprietary operating system that not many customers bought into due to the prohibitive price tag. During this period, Steve Jobs wasn't working for Apple, computer sales were slowing, and the company's revenue was drying up. CEO John Sculley tried revolutionizing the industry with his Newton message pad, but it ended up being a commercial failure. Apple's executives started to panic. They needed to boost computer sales, so they figured creating more models would do the trick. By the end of the 90s, when Jobs returned to Apple, the company was selling almost 20 different models of Macintosh. The product lineup was so convoluted and confusing that even Apple's own sales associates didn't understand which model was right for which customer. That's when Steve Jobs was brought back into Apple, thanks to their acquisition of his new computer company called Next. Jobs was appalled by the mess Apple was in, and he was shocked to find out most of their talented employees hadn't quit. He recognized what needed to be done in order for Apple to have any chance at survival. They needed to eliminate their bloated product lineup and focus on creating 4 computers, starting with the most in demand of all, a consumer desktop. But Apple couldn't just iterate on the failed desktops that came before. They had to do something radical by creating a computer so unconventional that it turned the entire industry on its head and was impossible for any consumer or competitor to ignore. Jobs put his most talented people on the project, which was led by their chief hardware designer Jonathan Ive. They imagined an all-in-one computer that was ready to be used just minutes after being unboxed. No displays to connect and calibrate, no external speakers to plug in, and no software to register. In fact, even the iMac being delivered in one box was impressive at the time, since most computers were separated into 2 boxes, one for the monitor and accessories, and a second for the computer tower itself. Apple actually released an ad demonstrating how quick and easy it was to set up and start using compared to a similarly spec'd HP Pavilion. But the iMac's user-friendliness was only the beginning. Jobs didn't just want the computer to work better than the competition, he also wanted it to look better. And that approach Apple took is very similar to Squarespace, who offers a website builder that's easier to use than anything else on the market and delivers beautiful results thanks to their incredible templates. And I should know, since I've been using the service for years. Squarespace automatically optimizes your website for mobile devices, so you don't have to waste time creating a desktop and mobile version of your site. They have built-in analytics tools that report page views, traffic sources, time on site, most read content, and more. You can create an exclusive paid membership area just like on YouTube, and you can even create an entire e-commerce store to sell physical or digital products. I actually did that a couple years ago to sell merch, and it was way easier than I imagined. Also, if you search for Apple Explained, my website is one of the first results. That's because Squarespace has the best search engine optimization tools that'll make your website more visible to more people. So go to squarespace.com for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/appleexplained to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Alright, so Jonathan Ive took a completely new approach to designing the iMac. Traditionally, hardware companies try to hide the complex technology inside their machines to make the computer look as neat and clean as possible. But Ive took the opposite approach with the iMac, creating a translucent housing that allowed users to see directly inside. This not only made it look more futuristic, but also feel less intimidating and more accessible. PCs in those days were also quite plain. All customers had to choose from were beige boxy towers to go with their choice of beige boxy monitor. Again, Ive took a completely different approach. He wanted the iMac to appear friendly, fun, and approachable. So instead of boxy, it was round, and instead of beige, it was blue. Plus, an integrated handle was added so users would feel welcome to touch and hold it, things you usually avoided with traditional computers. The iMac's design was so radical, in fact, that building it required a completely new production technique. Apple's engineering team worked directly with their Korean manufacturers to develop a production process that would allow the iMac to be built quickly while retaining a high level of quality control. The new approach was expensive though, costing Apple about 3 times more to produce than typical computer housings. But Jobs insisted that it be used, knowing that the iMac's bold design would help attract the customers needed to make it a success. And he was right. The iMac became the fastest selling computer in Apple history, with 800,000 units sold by the end of the year. That meant after 2 years of losses totaling $1.8 billion, Apple finally reported a profit in the first quarter of 1998 of $47 million. Just like that, a single product was able to achieve what many experts said was impossible, turning Apple around from a visionless company on the edge of bankruptcy to one that could innovate, connect with customers, and most importantly, make money. But for Jobs, things were just getting started. He leveraged the iMac's strengths in building a consumer notebook. It was called the iBook and was released a year after the iMac in 1999. It featured many of the same design elements, from its rounded edges to its colorful enclosure, and even came in fruity colors like the iMac, including tangerine, blueberry, and key lime. The iBook went on to become another sales success for Apple and laid the foundation for products that we know and love today. After all, the I prefix used in the names iPad, iPhone, and iPod was a trend started by the iMac and iBook. The two products also marked a return to form for Apple's design team. If you take a look at Apple's design book titled Designed by Apple in California, you'll notice that the first and second products featured are the original iMac and iBook. That same design team, led by Jonathan Ive, would go on to create Apple's most iconic tech products and become the most awarded design group in the world. So it's important to recognize that Apple began doing their best, most influential work at a time when most people expected them to be closing up shop. Despite the industry experts, financial analysts, and tech journalists, Steve Jobs and his team were able to defy all the odds by creating their most successful computer ever, which arrived just in the nick of time to save the company from bankruptcy. Alright guys, thanks for watching until the end. Don't forget to subscribe to help decide which topics I cover in the future, and I'll see you in the next video.